I'm just going to basically go through the history and the flow of the Everglades, what Captains is about, and how you guys can get involved. I live down in the Florida Keys and I work as the outreach and engagement coordinator for Captains for Clean Water down here. I also run a fly shop in Marathon, Florida. I love to fly fish for tarpon, and that's my big thing. For anyone who's unfamiliar, Captains for Clean Water is a nonprofit grassroots organization founded by a couple guides, fishing guides that are pictured here. They have been fighting to save the Everglades, and our main focus is Everglades restoration. We have a very small team, so we do try really hard to focus on Everglades restoration, but we do try to help out around the state and other issues. We've been pretty successful, and we do our best to rally the voices of the people in our local communities, including outdoorsmen and big corporations like Yeti and Orvis, Costa del Mar, and many more, in order to move the needle on state and federal policies that directly improve our water quality. So Chris and Daniel, a while back in 2016, and prior to that, they were fishing guides for a long time. They started to see massive, decline in the water quality. And then in 2016, there was a big Lake Okeechobee discharge right in the middle of tourist season to the Caloosahatchee, which is over in the west, like goes to the west coast. And as many of you know, I'm sure a lot of fishing guides make 70% of their income during just the 3 months, 5 months, right in the middle of tourist season. They started seeing their clients cancel and stuff like that. So they started seeing, hotel cancellations and all kinds of, like women didn't want to come down and sit on the beach because their husbands could fish, and it's much different out there. And back then it was just the same. So they started a Facebook group kind of out of desperation. They decided they wanted to have a meeting at Bass Pro in their hometown. They didn't expect a whole lot, and they showed up and there was 300 people there. TV shows and news centers and stuff like that, fishing guides, but not just fishing guides and anglers and commercial fishermen. There were bartenders and small business owners and hotel owners that were all just desperate because they were losing money due to this red tide. So they kind of talked to this group of people, and they felt like they basically asked, if you asked 10 of them, the problem was that you would get 10 different answers. So they just had a lack of education. There was a lack of readily available information for these people who were more than willing to become educated. Chris and Daniel decided to start Captains for Clean Water to provide basically a platform for all of these people to use their voice and also educate anyone who needed to be educated. The history of the Everglades. So historically, the Everglades used to start up here around present day Orlando. And this is Lake Kissimmee around here, if you can see my mouse. And all of this water would flow down into Lake Okeechobee, and then it would just overflow over the southern rim, and it would nourish the Everglades. And then it would eventually drain into Florida Bay around here. That is no longer what happens. This over here is what happens now. These are two man-made canals, rivers. And then there are many right around here. I hope you can see my mouse. These are many man-made like canals and pump stations that the water is moved around back and forth that serve, the interests of a few kind of special interest people. We won't really name them, but it's water supply. And then whenever we have really high lake levels or we have heavy rainfall, they pump all of this water that is now dammed in the bottom of it. It's polluted because it just sits stagnant. They pump all of this polluted water to the east and the west. And so the west goes over to the Gulf of Mexico. The east obviously goes over to the Atlantic. The east is the St. Lucie River, the west is the Caloosahatchee. And this creates what we call red tide, which is Karenia brevis, that causes red tide. We get the question often is it naturally occurring? Yes, it is naturally occurring. But, so is forest fires. Forest fires are naturally occurring, but if you throw a bunch of gasoline on them, you have a little bit worse of a situation than you did in the beginning. So whatever the naturally occurring red tide occurs offshore, Karenia brevis, it starts to move inshore, and then it starts to interact with more man-made nutrients that are kind of put in the water by a myriad of different avenues. One of them is the Lake Okeechobee discharges. One of them is rainfall and runoff. Nitrogen and phosphorus is basically the two nutrients that feed Karenia brevis the most. So it's a very unpicky eater. It'll eat just about anything in the water, and nitrogen really feeds it and supercharges it into these red tides that affect the fisheries, which is what you're seeing on the news. Whenever you see these dead, these big fish kills, that's because we have a supercharged red tide. So that is one of our biggest problems. Obviously, we have a myriad of them, but Captains really takes a couple of very specific approaches on all of this. This is a picture from Lake Okeechobee. This is actually a bacteria in Lake Okeechobee. This is not red tide. This is a picture of the lake moving the water out through the rivers into the ocean. This is going to be a picture of red tide. So this is what it looks like on the coast. So one of the biggest ways that we can make a difference, there's a couple ways. We have CERP, which is the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, and then we have LOSOM, which is Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. So LOSOM is Captain's main focus right now, just because we have kind of a time limit on it. So what it is basically a rule book that will dictate the way that Lake Okeechobee is managed for the next 10 years. It's the way that they move the water from the lake around the state. And so, at what point of the year, or during the wet season or the dry season, do we need to get it to recreational interests? At what point do we need it to get to the agriculture people? So what it's being managed under right now is called LORS 08. So it's over a decade old manual. So it's very outdated. It's kind of serving people, serving the people that should be served, but maybe not taking into account the rest of Florida. So recreational fishing, recreational marine in general. So what we need to do is make sure that the new manual takes us into account. Fishing, marine life, health across all of South Florida. So LOSOM is a process that the South Florida Water Management District, and most importantly, the Army Corps, is going through. We've been involved in this process with them since 2018. They came to a decision recently that we're going to go with Alternative Plan CC, which is the most beneficial to the largest amount of stakeholders in Florida. It's an amazing starting point, but that being said, it delivers a higher nutrient load to the Caloosahatchee, which goes to the Gulf of Mexico, than LORS 2008. So that's totally unacceptable. That being said, we have heard recently that we will be able to reduce a bit of discharges to the Caloosahatchee. We still need people to contact the Army Corps currently. What agency manages the lake? So that's the Army Corps and South Florida Water Management District. but it's going to be the Army Corps who's coming up with LOSOM. So the Army Corps, what you can do to write them, basically you can go to our website, go and like, you just go to www.captainsforcleanwater.org, and there's a huge like CTA right at the top. It's our main CTA right now. Click on it and you can input your information. It automatically populates an email. You can adjust that email as you see fit. And that automatically goes to the Army Corps, the Colonel. You can also do that with other CTAs that we have. So our software that we have within our website, basically, if we have like a CTA that needs to go to Congress for funding, which will come very soon in January of 2022, I believe. You basically can go in, just input your information, and it'll determine what district you're in, if you're a Florida resident or if you're not, and it'll auto-populate what representative you need to contact. Here's a CTA to email the Army Corps to reduce the damaging discharges to the east and to the west. We also need to focus on sending a lot of water south. That kind of comes under CERP, which is the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, the largest environmental restoration project in the world. It was passed in 2000, and kind of due to like lack of federal funding and political will, it's been kind of stagnated. But recently we've had a lot of progress on it. We just broke ground on the Everglades agricultural area reservoir. So that is going to make up of 10,500 acre storage and then additionally 6,500 acres of filtration marsh. So that is going to make it possible for us to store excess water from Lake Okeechobee, store it, clean it, and then send it through these filtration marshes and send it south, so that we don't have to inundate the east and the west with all of this water, and we can nourish the Everglades the way it needs to be nourished, because we haven't had it for so long. So we've experienced die-off, like seagrass die-offs and fish kills down in Florida Bay too, due to just lack of water in general. I think the biggest question that everyone always asks, and I think the biggest point of this presentation is what you guys can do to help. And by far and away, I'm sure all of you know, is use your voice. It's so powerful and it is so important. We've noticed in the last 5.5 years of being an organization is the best way you can move the needle is just new people getting involved and being vocal, not just on social media, definitely social media, but also to your representatives, your policymakers, who ultimately have the power to put pressure on the polluters. Also education. Setting aside time, which all of you do, to educate yourself on these issues. And obviously, you know, it's natural. The more you know about this subject, the more you're going to talk about it, the more you're going to talk to your friends and your family about it. And when you educate them, they're going to get interested, and then they set aside time, and then they educate their friends and family. And that's how our voices become louder than the people who have too much money that make the decisions that shouldn't be making the decisions. So when we as outdoorsmen and women have the ability to educate those around us, and we give them a voice too, our voices are louder than theirs. We create political cover for policymakers to make the right decisions. They are allowed to. They don't have to worry about the money that's being thrown at them, because all they have to say is, this is what my constituents said. I did what they wanted. So we make our voices louder, and that's all we have to do. If you want to get involved with Captains, Twitter, Instagram, obviously, and then you can sign up for the newsletter for free. You can become a member of our organization. It's $30 for the year. I would like to finish with this quote, and if I cry, don't make fun of me. But this quote is from Shannon Estenos, who has served as the Chief Operating Officer of the Everglades Foundation. She's currently the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Fishing and Wildlife and Parks in the current administration. She has a 24-year career in conservation and holds degrees in international affairs and civil engineering from Florida State University. This quote is impactful to me because it encourages me to use my voice, even though I am only one person. I am definitely not a scientist or a politician. She said this during her opening speech at an Everglades conference in 2019. And she said it while she was pointing to this picture. This is Daniel Andrews and Chris Whitman. These guys aren't policy people. They're not environmentalists. They are fishing guides. And in 3 short years, they are now operating at the highest political level. They are creating a new Everglades movement that's less patient. They have no patience with government. They have none of it. They are more demanding. They are less bureaucratic and more democratic. They are inclusive. They are completely unintimidated by power, completely. They are fast on their feet, and they are the evidence that political resilience in the Everglades is strong. Thank you guys so much for having me. Please feel free anytime to contact me if you have any questions about red tide, about anything at all. If I don't know the answer, I will make sure that I get it to you. Thanks for having me.